Warning, the following program contains critical thinking, honest opinions, viewpoints on culture that may seem conservative, and a positive view on absolute detestable things such as marriage and children. Listener discretion is advised.
Why hello to all of you functioning human beings. So it's been brought to my attention as of late that an issue related to my home state of Tennessee specifically has been making the rounds in social circle conversations for what seems to be not the first time. I'd say we're all pretty generally aware of certain age restrictions when it comes to tobacco and alcohol and driver's licenses, etc. And today I'm going to spend a brief amount of time discussing this thing called the Mature Minor Doctrine. But first, I'm gonna go on a quick rant, okay, about insurance companies and age restrictions and some of the David and Goliath-sized quote-unquote pebbles, okay, that we throw at young people, all while telling them to grow up and be adults because they're 18 now. So I'm gonna do that real quick. You have to be 21 years old to buy tobacco or nicotine, but you can buy lottery tickets at 18 still. You have to be 21 to drink alcohol, but you can join the army at 18 and go fight for your country. But I guess if you do that, though, you can smoke. Get it? Got it? Good? Great. I mean, I want to know the actual percentage of adults, okay, who waited until they were 21 years old to consume alcohol. That's a statistic I would like to know. It's not one that we will get to know, because most of the, statistics you can find on that type of stuff is from, college surveys, and I'm like, really? You think people are telling you the truth about their underage drinking and smoking habits? Really? Come on now. But you know what? It's fine. It's fine. It's all fine. I've got one here for you, okay? What about if I go to intern for a state legislature halfway across the country and I drive there in a car that I bought with my money and I own it, and I fill that tank up with the gas that I paid for with the money that I worked for at the job that I have because I'm an adult, and it's a 20-hour drive and I've been driving for 12 hours straight, and I stop at the nearest 3-star hotel to get some much-needed shut-eye. Oh, wait, it's not a run-down 1-star motel on the side of a busy highway in a bad part of town. Guess who can't get a room without someone 21 years of age being present? That would be this 20-year-old right here. Next scenario. What if I have a fellow adult friend of mine who wants to come visit me and planned on renting a car from the airport to drive to my house, which is a couple hours away from the airport? Oh, I have to go pick them up because they aren't 21 yet? Or if they are 21, they have to pay a young renter's fee every day that they have the car because they aren't 25 yet? You know, for all the things that we expect out of young adults, we're expecting, people at 18, 19, 20 to be getting out into the world and getting jobs and, finding their own place and, going to school and doing all of these things, okay? And honestly, I think standards for that are even lower now than they've been in the past. Either way, it's like there's so many stupid hoops to jump through in these scenarios. And I guess it's mainly thanks to insurance companies and their wonderful policies, which is why, businesses are like, oh, we have these age restrictions. But it's just so frustrating. And I guess kind of just what I'm getting at here is I think there has got to be more consistent messaging. The mixed messaging here doesn't lend itself to encouraging stable, well-adjusted adults who are capable of things, when in their transition to adulthood, they're being tossed back and forth on the whims of what our society thinks they can handle, or what their parents think they can handle, or what their professors think they can handle, or the doctors, or whoever, okay? And I think there's a line in the sand somewhere, and I think we need to find it. Okay, if the established age for adulthood in the US is 18 years old, then we need to start acting like it. On both ends. I don't just say this for the sake of 18-year-olds being able to do whatever they want. The statement applies to both ends of the spectrum. If somebody is a legal adult, then we need to act like it. If somebody is not a legal adult and is in fact still a minor, then we need to freaking start acting like it. So now let me tell you a little bit about the Mature Minor Doctrine, if you were previously unaware of it. So it's my understanding that this has been in place in the state of Tennessee since the Cardwell versus Bechtel case that took place in Tennessee in 1987. And it pretty much said that mature minors who are capable of meeting the informed consent standard also have the ability to give consent to medical procedures. And you might go, but where's the pushback? Well, I don't know, because the doctrine was then reaffirmed by Tennessee's Attorney General at the time in 2003. Tennessee is definitely not the only state that has this doctrine or one similar in place, so if you're not sure if your state has one, I would check on that if I were you, especially if you're a parent. Now, oftentimes stuff like this, just kind of flies under the radar for a good chunk of time, especially decisions or laws that were put into place before the internet had us able to access all this legislation with a few clicks of a button, before all of us lowly civilians had access to it, right? But there was an uproar about this. I'm not at all surprised that there was. It kind of happened when the woman who headed up Tennessee's COVID response, Dr. Michelle Fiscus, she's with the Tennessee Department of Health, she decided to put out a statement in May of last year reminding people about the Mature Minor Doctrine. Now, I'm assuming her reason for doing so was to make sure that minors knew where they could go get the COVID-19 vaccine and that they could go get it even if their parents didn't want them to. But I think it kind of backfired because parents were not very happy, and I think it's pretty clear why. Now, Dr. Fiscus says in her kind of statement or letter or whatever you want to call it, that pretty much in light of new information from the CDC on immunization practices and how the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine was recommended for use in children ages 12 through 15 years of age, this doctor thought it would be helpful to share Tennessee's Mature Minor Doctrine with the state's vaccinating partners, which is, of course, any place that offers vaccinations. Now, she includes the doctrine in her letter, and then she goes on to say that there is no federal legal requirement for parent or caregiver consent for COVID-19 or any other vaccine. Additionally, COVID-19 vaccines and other vaccines may now be administered without regard to timing. This includes simultaneous administration of COVID-19 vaccines and other vaccines on the same day, as well as co-administration within 14 days. It should be noted that it is unknown whether reactogenicity is increased with co-administration, including with other vaccines known to be more reactogenic, such as adjuvanted vaccines. When deciding whether to co-administer with COVID-19 vaccines, providers should consider whether the patient is behind or at risk of becoming behind on recommended vaccines and the reactogenicity profile of the vaccines being co-administered. Thank you for all you're doing to protect Tennesseans, including our adolescents. Now, like I previously stated, it's kind of clear why she felt the need to remind people about this doctrine. She obviously feels a particular type of way about vaccines that I would tend to disagree with. But, I guess let's now go over what this doctrine says exactly. What even is this thing? Well, according to the Tennessee Department of Health, the Mature Minor Doctrine in Tennessee permits healthcare providers to treat certain minors without parental consent according to the rule of sevens, and it references the Cardwell versus Bechtel case that I mentioned earlier. The doctrine states that under the age of 7 there is no capacity, and the physician must have parental consent to treat, unless a statutory exception applies. Between the ages of 7 and 14, there is a rebuttable presumption that there is no capacity, and a physician generally should get parental consent before treating unless a statutory exception applies. Between the ages of 14 and 18, there is a rebuttable presumption of capacity, and the physician may treat without parental consent unless the physician believes that the minor is not sufficiently mature to make his or her own healthcare decisions. Certain statutes also explicitly permit the treatment of minors for specific conditions without parental consent, including treatment of juvenile drug abusers, emergency situations, treatment for STDs, providing contraception, and providing prenatal care. In the case of abortion, however, the legislature has made clear that no minor may obtain an abortion without either parental consent or a court order in exceptional circumstances. Tennessee County Health Departments follow Tennessee law and provide medical treatment and vaccinations to patients as young as 14 without parental consent if the individual provider determines that the patient meets the definition of a mature minor in accordance with Tennessee law. Okay, so serious question here, guys. How old were you when you stopped nudging your mom at doctor's office appointments so that she would know you didn't want to be the one holding conversation with the doctor? I mean, come on. This is ridiculous. I mean, I was told all the time growing up by adults in my life how mature I came across. And that's all fine and dandy, but I guarantee you that none of those adults that said that to me would have deemed me fit to make my own medical decisions at 14 or 15. It's insane. And I think part of the problem with this type of approach, with the way that this Mature Minor Doctrine states things, is it's not even necessarily that there's a kid making their own medical decisions. It's that the physician is making medical decisions for this minor child. Because ultimately, it comes down to the physician's discretion. It's up to them. They're the ones making the decisions on your child's medical care, on your child's vaccination status. And that's crazy to me. That violates parents' rights, if you ask me. But to me, what this looks like is you'll have doctors, of course, who are like, hey, I don't know if this is really my responsibility. You know, they maybe respect the choice of parents in the matter, and they probably wouldn't look at a minor child and go, yeah, you're totally capable of making your own decisions. But that's just because of where they personally stand on the issue. Whereas, on the other hand, you're going to have doctors who think that these kids should be vaccinated whether their parents like it or not, so of course they're going to be like, yeah, you're 14, but you know what? You're a mature minor. You can make this decision for yourself. And then they get the kid vaccinated, because it's all up to the physician. And I mean, obviously, every physician doesn't think the same way. Every doctor is not going to actively go out to undermine a parent's, discretion. But at the same time, there are plenty who would. And we can pretend all day long that they wouldn't. But I feel like we've seen repeatedly through situations with doctors, situations with teachers, that people in positions of authority often take advantage of them. It's kind of a thing that happens on a regular basis, so I don't understand why we would be trusting other people with our children. I mean, if I was a parent, I just wouldn't be okay with someone who, might think that my teenage daughter should be able to get an abortion without my knowledge, deciding even on something that could be perceived as trivial, like a vaccine. And I feel like if you don't already, this is just another reason why I would advise you, if you're a parent, to make sure that your kid's primary care physician is somebody that, respects your decision and respects your discretion as a parent, and, wouldn't go behind what you say just because your kid came in alone asking for a vaccine or asking for something that, they know you wouldn't agree with. If you're more into, homeopathic medicine, I would find a doctor who agrees with homeopathic medicine and doesn't look at you like you're stupid, because you don't need that type of influence on your kid if they go looking for medical treatment, if that makes sense. If you have been delaying vaccines for your younger children, or if you have chosen not to vaccinate your kids at all, or if you've carefully been picking and choosing what and when it comes to vaccines for your kids, then I would be extremely sure that whoever you're seeing for that respects your decision. Because I know there's a lot of doctors who don't respect that decision when a parent makes it. When I was a kid, I know that we went to plenty of doctor's visits where, they would ask, are they up to date on their vaccines? And, there's some dirty looks that some of those doctors will give you if you don't vaccinate your kids, or if you've delayed vaccines, or if you've only given certain ones. I mean, some of these people will just stare at you as a parent like you're the stupidest person on planet Earth. And my heart goes out to some of you moms out there who've endured that, because I probably would have lost my crap a million times if I were you. That's something I'll have to work on for the future, but yeah. I just remember how nice it was and how much more comfortable we felt when we found a family doctor who actually, respected my parents' decisions in that regard. And, it's really not that hard to disrespect people's medical decisions, but, people, am I right? Anyways, when I was doing my little bout of research for this podcast episode, I found this website that I didn't know existed because I've never felt the need to search up if I could go behind my parents' back to get a vaccine. Just never felt that strongly about it, to be completely honest, and now I'm an adult and can make my own decisions, and I do so. But this website, okay, is called vaxteen.org. And they've got a page for almost every state, I think, and you can just click on your state to see if you are allowed as a minor to go get a vaccine without parental consent. So I clicked on the Tennessee page on this website just to see what it said, right? And it has a question, as a minor in Tennessee, can you consent to vaccinations? And then it says, the actual law. And it goes through the whole, thing, the whole spiel. The judicial decision provides that mature minors, blah, 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 blah. Okay, everything that I just read to you. Mind you, this is signed off by the Tennessee Department of Health HIV/STD program. Comforting, right? But what this means is another section on the page, and it goes, in Tennessee, minors who are 14 years old or older do not need their parents' consent to receive all healthcare services, including vaccinations. This is called a Mature Minor Doctrine, and essentially means that if you talk to your doctor/healthcare provider and they decide you are mature enough to make your own healthcare decisions, you can. And I'm like, okay, wonderful. We love encouraging kids to go behind their parents' back, especially when probably a good chunk of these kids are not in any danger whatsoever. They're not being abused. They just might, feel pressured by other people or disagree with their parents' decision. But, you're 14, 15, 16. You're allowed to disagree with your parents, but you're not really supposed to go behind their backs and make medical decisions on your own, especially when they're probably being influenced by the physician you're seeing because they're the one deciding if you are mature enough to make your own medical decisions. I mean, come on. If I, a 20-year-old, am not mature enough in the eyes of an insurance company to rent a hotel room where I won't get stabbed in my sleep or find a dead squirrel in the shower, if I am a 20-year-old, am not able to rent a car without paying an obscene amount of money, and that's only in 2 states. In the rest of the states, I have to be 21. If I can't even do the things that I should be able to do in order to do all the things that I'm expected to do as an adult, why in the world are people who are just barely teenagers being allowed to make their own medical decisions when they have parents? It's not like we're talking about children in foster care or people in abusive homes or, we're just talking about every kid across the state can go do this. But again, it's not even about the kids and the fact that they're not old enough to make their own decisions about these things. It's about the fact that you're taking the decision away from the parents, the people who birthed them, raised them, pay to provide for them, give them a home, hypothetically love them to death, right? You're taking the decision away from them, and you're giving this decision of medical care to a physician who may have never even met your child before. That's insane. If we're talking conventional rights of a child, this is freaking it right here. Let's just put this into perspective here. The legal age of consent in Tennessee isn't even 16. It's 18 here. But your 14-year-old can still go say, hey, I need treatment for an STD, or hey, I need the COVID-19 vaccine that, hasn't even been out for, 3 years, and I actually, I know there's no long-term studies on it, except for, what? Your 14-year-old probably isn't even thinking that hard about it. Oh my goodness. You know what I was thinking about when I was 14? I was thinking about music. And I was thinking about hanging out with my friends. And I was thinking about why on earth can't I trim my bangs perfectly because they look whack and I'm insecure around people my age. That's what I was thinking about when I was 14. Not, gosh darn it, I wish my parents would have gotten me vaccinated. Let me look up online if I can get vaccinated behind their back. Like, I don't even know what else to say. But anyways, and then also on this vaccine.org thing, I decided to click on a state where they don't have any of this, like, mature minor doctrine type stuff in place. Arizona is one of those states. So I clicked on there, and I honestly just kind of found this amusing. But it says, as a minor in Arizona, can you consent to vaccinations? In Arizona, there are currently no laws allowing minors to receive vaccines without parental consent. However, you may have other options. While minors cannot currently receive vaccines without parental consent in the state, use our suggested materials to discuss why you want to get vaccinated with your parents and see if you can change their minds. And that last sentence ends with an exclamation point. Just wanted to make that clear. I wasn't actually that excited about the content on this webpage. Anyways, so I click on their suggested materials link, and it took me to this page where it says something like, busting vaccine myths, okay? And, I just thought it was funny, because they're, like, pointing these kids to their suggested materials that will, you know, they can use to see if it'll change their parents' minds, and then the list of myths is like, myth number 1, vaccines cause autism. Myth number 2, natural immunity is better than vaccine-acquired immunity. Myth number 3, vaccines contain unsafe toxins. Myth number 4, better hygiene and sanitation are actually responsible for decreased infections, not vaccines. Myth number 5, vaccines aren't worth the risk. Myth number 6, vaccines can infect my child with the disease it's trying to prevent. Myth number 7, we don't need to vaccinate because infection rates are already so low in the United States. And then that ends their list of myths, right? But I just think it's funny how, and of course they all go into detail, okay? Like, it's not just the myths, they go into how to debunk them. But I just think it's kind of funny how they think that this type of thing will convince somebody's parents to let them go get the vaccine. I mean, maybe it will, but I don't know, most of the parents that I have met throughout my life who have made the decision to not vaccinate their kids, or who have made the decision to delay vaccinations until their kids are older, or whatever choice they made that is not like the prim and proper vaccine schedule, okay? Whatever it is, these parents making these decisions are not stupid. They've put a lot of thought into this decision. They've put a lot of research into this decision. I mean, generally, these parents have really wrestled with, you know, the question of, you know, am I doing the right thing? Because people keep telling me I'm stupid. But they go with their gut and they go with what they've researched. And I don't understand what's so wrong about that, to be honest. I mean, these people care about their kids enough to go against something that is so strongly a part of our medical culture in the United States and across the world, right? If they really believed that there was more risk to not vaccinating their kids, don't you think they would have vaccinated their kids? I don't know. It just doesn't make much sense to me why this is even that big of a deal. But especially regarding the COVID-19 vaccine, I'm like, even if you vaccinated your kids for everything else, if you sit there and tell me, no, I'm not vaccinating my kid for COVID, even if I already vaccinated them for everything else on the list, I completely get it. The vaccine hasn't even been out that long. It came out, the end of 2020? And it's been FDA approved or whatever for less time than that? There has been absolutely no time for there to be long-term studies, or for there to be, you know, decades of this vaccine being out, and time for adverse reactions and cases like that to come up. Half the stuff that's come out about the COVID-19 vaccine hasn't even been accurate. Because they keep going back and forth like, oh, this is gonna cure it. You're not gonna get it anymore if you get this vaccine. You're not gonna get COVID again. Oh wait, you can still get COVID. Sorry. You still have to wear a mask. Sorry, you can still transfer the virus to somebody else. Sorry. Like, oh wait, no, you can't. You can't transfer the virus to anybody else. It's only the unvaccinated people who can pass it along. But you can still get it. And it's like, what even? The mental mind games. I mean, this whole social experience regarding the COVID-19 vaccine, it's just like, it's what I imagine watching the Labyrinth movie with David Bowie in it, while on acid would feel like. I don't know what that would feel like, but that's what I imagine it would feel like, is like just the same amount of like head screwiness as I feel trying to wrap my mind around what is going through people's heads with this COVID-19 vaccine stuff. It literally like doesn't make any sense to me. And it's my understanding that part of the reason that people might kind of back up this Mature Minor Doctrine type of thing is because of those parent-child scenarios where there is abuse in the home. And, you know, to me, that argument is kind of similar to, like, that one really long dissertation that I think it was, like, a Harvard or Yale professor wrote on why we should ban homeschooling, and it was all about, you know, the abuse that happens, and I'm like, okay, abuse happens in the homes of public schoolers, abuse happens in the homes of people who, you know, do vaccinate their children. I really don't know what that argument is in this situation, to be honest. But I think we can bring up all these different parent-child scenarios all day long where maybe a parent makes a decision that we perceive as wrong, where somebody might perceive not vaccinating your kids as abusive, whatever. But can we all please just take a step back, okay? And just remember, for once, that parents are literally just human beings, and that human beings aren't going to do everything perfect, because they're not perfect. And I don't say that in regard to abuse. I'm saying that in regard to when parents make decisions that we might not personally agree with. I mean, yes, there are not great human beings. There are evils in the world like the abuse of children. But not every situation in which a parent makes a decision for their child that you disagree with is child abuse. Now, I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that would take what I just said and try to turn it back around on me and how I view parents that medically transition their minor children with gender-affirming surgery, okay? But I do think those things are drastically different than a parent saying no to those things, or saying no, their kid can't get injected with a highly questionable vaccine like the COVID-19 one. I also think it's worth noting that we're already seeing, and most definitely over the next 10 to 20 years, we'll be seeing even more, a whole new generation of parents, a whole new way of parenting. And I say a whole new way of parenting, it's not brand new. There's plenty of people like my parents, there's people in that generation who have, you know, done their best to implement this type of approach, but you know how parenting works, okay? You have one generation of parents, and then the kids go, oh, well, that wasn't good, but I liked that, and then they try their best to carry on the good parts from their parents' parenting and to leave behind the bad parts. And the hope is that eventually you trickle down the generational line enough, you get rid of a good chunk of the bad parts, right? So that's not necessarily anything new, but I think what I've noticed a lot with younger parents, the ones that I've seen in my circles and the way that I've seen them try to implement parenting, those in their, like, you know, mid-20s, early 20s, and I would say even the ones in their early 30s, I think parents are more aware now than ever of the baggage that they bring into their children's lives, like, as their own human being, like, what they've gone through in their life, and they go, hey, I don't want to pass this on down to my kid just because I can't, you know, put myself in check. And so I think these things eventually trickle down through the generations and we get a better grasp on how to deal with them. You know, in this generation of parents, there's a lot more of a leaning towards gentle parenting. And, you know, that's got kind of a negative stigma behind it. A lot of people are like, oh, so you just give your kid everything you want and you never say no and you're always nice to them? And it's like, no, not exactly. It just means you're being more of a gentle parent and you're trying to be more understanding of your kids' emotions. It doesn't mean that there is no discipline. It doesn't mean that there are no consequences. It's just a different approach that attempts to understand the children's emotions more. But of course, no parenting method is going to be perfect. No generation is going to be perfect. No group of people, okay? No individual person is going to be perfect. And one of the things that does concern me about what we've seen in parenting throughout recent years are parents who do just kind of go along with the whims of their children regarding sex and gender issues, and even, of course, promoting certain identity and gender-related ideologies onto their children, especially when they're young. Although, if you ask me, I think there are plenty of young people like myself who do see what's been going on with that, and intend to handle things a bit differently than how the majority of our generation seems to be leaning towards doing things. But, I don't know. We'll see. I do know that that is one concern that people might have with this whole Mature Minor Doctrine, how it impacts the whole practice of prescribing hormones or performing gender-affirming surgeries, etc. on minors. All I know is that in the state of Tennessee, present law, according to the Tennessee General Assembly, generally prohibits healthcare prescribers from prescribing a course of treatment that involves hormone treatment for gender dysphoric or gender incongruent prepubertal minors. That's a special word that I can barely say. Anyways, there's also a new bill that's being proposed for the 2023 legislative session in Tennessee that will hopefully restrict this type of so-called medical care for minors. Again, according to the Tennessee General Assembly, this bill will replace present law and instead will establish prohibitions related to the performance on minors of certain medical procedures related to gender identity, creating private causes of action for violations, and establishing additional penalties for violations. Now, I'm not sitting here going, go advocate for this law to be passed, because I haven't looked too deeply into it. I'm just saying this is something that's going to be proposed for the 2023 session, and if you want to take a further look at it, you should. And I'll give you one little tidbit of advice before I go for the week. In my experience with states with large populations, you probably won't get most of your state representatives on the phone directly. And likely if you are able to share your whole spiel on the phone with someone, that someone is probably office staff or an intern. And that's not to say that the office staff are not good people to talk to about these things. Sometimes they are invested in the issues that you want to talk about. However, they really have no impact for the most part on whether or not your representative votes for or against that bill. So I'd say your best bet in trying to encourage or discourage the passing of a bill, if you don't have the time to actually go out to the Capitol or to lobbyist groups to advocate for your side of things, your best bet is probably to call your state representative's office. And I'll just put a gentle reminder here that your 2 state senators, your US senators, those are not your state representatives. They don't vote in your state assembly, okay? They're not a part of your state legislature or your general assembly or whatever. They go vote at the US level, okay? So just a quick reminder there. So if you're in Tennessee and you try to call Senator Haggerty or Blackburn about an issue that's a state bill, they're probably just gonna humor you and say, okay, we'll let them know, and then you'll get off the phone and your opinion will have done nothing. So just make sure that you are calling your actual state representatives. And just call and let them know that you'd like the representative to vote either for or against that specific bill, and it's usually helpful to know the name of the bill that you're talking about. So if it's HB 0001 or SB 0003, okay, just know what bill you're talking about so that they actually can put it into the system. Because more than likely, these offices, they have some sort of tally system or computer program for constituent opinions on these bills. They don't really look at your comments on it. They don't probably really look at your stories or your spiels on why the bill should be passed or shouldn't be passed. And yes, that can be frustrating, but let's just remember that representatives are people as well. They might not really spend their time reading through all the things that people called and said on the phone. However, most of these places, they do have a computer system or some sort of way to keep a tally of constituent opinions so that their offices can just print that off and show them which way their constituents are leaning on a certain bill or a certain issue so that they can take that into consideration when they vote. Anyways, I hope if that was your first time hearing about the Mature Minor Doctrine, that you aren't too terribly irritated at this point. I know it can be kind of frustrating and depressing to look at the state of our country or look at the state of our state. However, we just have to do our best to take a deep breath and trust that it's all gonna go the way it's all supposed to go, and God's gonna take care of it however it's supposed to be taken care of. But I do believe that we have gotten to the end of this week's episode. So as much as I know you hate to hear me go, just remember that new episodes of Subtle Rampage drop every Wednesday morning. You can follow the podcast on Instagram or Facebook, and you can tune in next week for more content. Bye-bye.